So first off, you are a captain, prior captain in the Army, and still National Guard. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and I am a Master Sergeant in the Air National Guard, which everyone would say is the more comfortable Army, or maybe like the Chair Force. So we got a lot to get in here because we've been in some big business, and I just heard you say that most of the leadership out there really isn't good. Tell me about that. Like, what does that mean to you, and where do you think people are misunderstanding that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I see across my consultancy is that you get someone who's really good at marketing or really good at sales. And because of that, they can grow a business in an organization. They can start to hire. They can bring on a team. They don't know how to lead the team. So just because you were able to make, $1 million in your sales funnel, that doesn't mean that you're going to be an effective leader when it comes to building the organization, scaling the systems, and the outcomes long term.
Yeah. I had early on, I did some consulting for Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, and that startup founder, it was through a consulting firm, a startup, and the two founders, one guy was a really good engineer, and then the other woman was a tremendous salesperson. I remember one day they had a good sales call, and they came in at the table, they sat the six of us down, and they're like, "We don't think any of you could have done that call." And I'm just like, dang, man, like they just went in like stomping on people and not really boosting morale. Yeah. So I've found that some of these guys are scared to let go, but like what are some of the first steps when people are seeing big money and operations are getting more complicated than just them and two or three people? What are those first fear points or like misaligned mindsets that they have that put them down that path?
So Air Force guy would probably say Army guy a little bit stupider. Now,
chose wrong.
Because of that, I have to simplify everything, right?
Yeah.
So I believe in simplification in systems. I think where a lot of people get it wrong is they overcomplicate it right out of the gate. They think that they need to have more things going on than what they actually need to have going on. So I find that the most simplified leadership systems are the one that are successful. So what I do is I actually just draw on my military experience. I teach organizations how to do things like a mission brief. How to define what the commander's intent is in an end state, how to do after action reviews, how to backwards plan, right? So it's not anything that's, this crazy, niche specific system. Yeah. But I think if you approach leadership with those simplified ideas, you make it very clear and concise for anyone in the organization to be able to understand what their job is, what the mission is, what they're trying to accomplish, and how they can operate, within their left and right limits. You'll find way more success.
Yeah, I mean, but also, as I've advanced more in leadership, what I find, regardless of AI, what I find is that people are trying to hide behind their busyness. Because even 12 years ago, 14 years ago, when I left the military and got in the corporate world, you'd walk into someone's office and they're just like back-to-back meetings, double booked, so flustered. And I'm like, man, you're like scared to just sit down and be present with the problem for a moment, or like confront some young troop that, I use the word troop still, but like this is a junior associate that just needs to know that you actually have a clear picture of somewhere to go and you're willing to take risk and you won't roll them under the bus. So do you see who's getting it right? Let's start there. Maybe like how big of a business do you see? What leaders are really getting it right that people could look up to? But then I want to go way back to like just when I left the military and show you what I was seeing in the boardroom.
So I think one of the things that you touched on is that leaders are hiding behind busyness. And that's something that I know I was guilty of when I first started, growing my e-commerce businesses. Was that if I always had a task to do, then I would just prioritize the task and not the people. And I realized that wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go long term. I also identified, and I'm sure you've seen this too, the leaders who are in the trenches with the people, right? When you're present with someone, there's just innately a higher level of respect because they know that you're in it with them. So the leaders that I think are getting it right are the ones who are being very engaged with their teams, right? And we look at this, especially on your end, in your position from maybe the revenue perspective, the people who are driving the most revenue are the ones who are actually out there marketing, selling, building the process with the team as a whole. And so those are the people that are getting it right.
Let's use an example there because just bringing this real quick to corporate. We sat in on the largest deal I sat on was $23 million. And
Okay.
just 2 weeks before, we had set up all these rules on deal desk, and this is how we're going to handle product usage, and this is what the ICP is. And then this $23 million deal comes across the board. All that stuff gets tossed out the window. So now all of a sudden, hey, deal desk, I need you to make all these concessions. Hey, operations people, I need you to do all this manual work for us. Hey, sales people, I need you to do all this weird creative things for us. On the revenue side, for me, from an operator, what I've seen where poor leadership shines is where you've created a bunch of busy work for someone, and then you're not in those trenches doing the hard work with them. Correct. And I think people, they hear like Jocko Willink, which I have great respect for, but they'll hear some other military leader say something like, oh, lead from the front. And I've often sat down with a corporate leader and said, and kind of gotten them to visualize that literally means just start walking somewhere, like be going in the direction that you want your whole team to go along, and be doing that crappy work to some level. It doesn't mean the CRO is like manually updating all the spreadsheets for you, but
Correct.
You have to know that they're in there willing to do what they asked you to do, and that it's aligned with the mission, and that they believe in it. Otherwise, you're just like in your armchair doing this crappy quarterbacking and telling people to do a bunch of busy work. So what's your take then on lead from the front, or what that means to you to be in the trenches?
So I think you touched on it earlier, and it was the being present with the team, with the people, right?
Yeah.
If you're sitting back, like you said, armchair quarterbacking, there's not the same level of respect for what you're doing. They don't see that you're in it, invested in them, invested in the process. For me, as an example, right, we were growing our e-com portfolio to the point where we was doing over $20 million a year. And in doing that, we hire, a pretty big sales team and a big customer service team. And they're fielding the majority of the phone calls. But the best managers that we were able to develop and put into the position to run those teams are the ones that came from the phone center themselves.
That's right.
Because all of their peers see that they're in the thing with them. And it's the same process in the military and across larger organizations as well, right? You don't necessarily have to be doing the minutia and the mundane acts, but you do need to be present with the team. And as far as leading from the front, I like that, but I prefer the term leading from where you're most effective.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I think it's just the opposite of leading from the front is being behind everyone while they're doing all the work and like barking orders.
No one likes that. Right? It kind of actually undermines this concept of relationship-based leadership that I really like.
Yeah.
If you can get in with the people, you talk with them, you get to know them, understand what motivates them, their why, their family situation, all of those things, right? You're just a more effective communicator with them. You can speak to what is unique about them or what they care about, and you can just lead them in a more effective manner with better communication.
Yeah, I mean, we call that like getting in the suck with them. I don't want to get trapped in all the military jargon, but going way back to, I did 12 years. This will throw a curveball in my military career. I actually did my 12 years active duty in the Coast Guard. So I was in E6 when I separated from the Coast Guard. And then I joined later when I started my own business. Before going back into the corporate world, I joined the Air National Guard. Anyway, so now I'm in the real military is the short version of that story. But when I got out of the Coast Guard, I still was connected to what we would call search and rescue missions. I ran a lot of those even from the IT side. And so going into the IT and the corporate world, I used to get calls where two things. One, the Coast Guard had this little playback system on a radio call. So it's like 911. So if you're in the 12 miles out to sea and you're stranded and it's like, come in, Coast Guard, and it's barely receptible, they need to be able to play it back, figure out where you are and how to get there. Well, if that went down, someone dies, someone dies because all of a sudden you don't hear it, you don't know where you're going. That's the last chance to get it. Also, the small boat stations are like a firehouse. They had a search and rescue alarm. If the search and rescue alarm doesn't go off, like nobody goes out to save you, you die. So I know that sounds tongue in cheek, but when you're in any military capacity or law enforcement capacity or really lots of service capacities, you are faced with real life and death situations. So what I found interesting is when I got into the corporate world, I remember distinctly the first time sitting in like a boardroom, we were trying to figure out how to do tipping tier pricing on something. Okay. And everyone was panicking. They were like angry and opinions mattered so much, and they were flustered and they didn't know what to do next. And I just remember thinking like, nobody's going to die in this one.
Yeah.
Like let's all do some very quick operational risk management is what we called it in the Coast Guard. And that simple example was if there's a shipboard fire, for example, two of your troops, two of your sailors are down below and they're fighting the fire. It's getting out of hand. You have to close the hatch, right? And you would have been faced with this more than anyone as a captain or as an O3. So there's 100 people on the next level. You do very quick operational risk management. A hatch has to be closed or left open. Below 2 troops, above 100 troops. Quick upside, downside, boom, shut the hatch. And there was no emotion in it. You didn't dwell on it. And you, in a corporate environment, you could do a very similar thing by, here's the AAR impact. Here's the gap hassles that we'll have. Here's the lawyer fees. Upside, downside, boom, decision. Move forward, measure results, make the next one. So I know that oversimplifies life and death and says like, oh man, that's easy. But what kind of framework or mental standpoint do you take when you're talking to these people, and how do you try to like coach them through things when they just seem totally flustered about stuff that at the end of the day is just numbers in a bank?
So it might oversimplify life and death, but it is not oversimplifying the business decision-making process, in my opinion.
I think so.
The most effective leaders are going to be the ones who are making decisions from a data-driven standpoint versus the emotional standpoint or the emotional perception. So I think that's probably the most important way that you approach that, and you just have those conversations very frankly. It's often easier to do if you can connect it to the revenue target or the goal or the data, the KPI that you're trying to achieve, right? And if you can look at it in a very if-then format, I think that's what I've found to be one of the most effective ways to overcome that emotion or that knee-jerk reaction when you are talking about those kind of things.
Yeah, let's do a scenario.
Sure.
Because before we hit record, you mentioned you talked to junior VPs, which are almost my favorite people because like they got this brand new title, 2 big
they're
letters.
Excited. They're excited.
It's so good. It's finally on LinkedIn. And then they're going in front of the board for the first time, or they're going in front of the C-suite, and they got to do some presentation. And I have found myself, even in an ops capacity, sometimes I'm just sitting there telling a VP like, listen, dude, like you have the positional authority and leadership already. It was given to you. You don't have to prove that part. Now let's talk about what we walk through next. But what I find is that they hit this paralysis wall. It's like they're flustered. They don't know what they're going to do. They're sweating. They're going to show up anyway because they get fired if they don't. But in that scenario now, junior VP, he or she is just saying, Parker, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm so nervous. What's your thought process? What are you doing next with him or her?
I love that you are asking it like this, because just yesterday I was having lunch with a VP that I'm consulting with. He just took over VP of sales, right? Young guy. He's in his mid-20s. So dude's crushing it early. But he has absolutely no idea what comes next. He did really well at sales, so he got promoted. But now he's like, I got to lead a team, and I have no idea what I'm doing leading a team. I believe very much, and you're maybe familiar with this from the military mindset too, you fall to the level of your systems, right? Just like you would fall to the level of your training. So how do we put or train or teach you a system that's going to be replicatable that you can always rely on? And that's where I default back to those simplified military-derived or military-inspired systems. Again, if you can sit down with an individual ahead of time, maybe depending on your team, obviously, but sit down with the individual, outline what their objective is, outline what their goals are, give them their left and right limits. That's a very clear and defined way for them to operate and what they're working towards. Then we do the supervise and refine as the process goes. We have an after-action review where we're going to ask ourselves, what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, why, and then ask, what do we need to do better next time, and what do we sustain so that we can keep having good results. That puts you into the process of continuous improvement. So you apply that with the team, and then you continuously follow up on it. Like I said, with that supervise and refine piece, your team sees that you're invested in them. They know that you're helping them work towards a process of continuous improvement and growth. And I think that's where you find that real level of success there. It's something very simple that a guy can just implement right off the bat.
Yeah, you know what the military does well, in particularly the Army and the Marines, is these repeatable mantras / systems.
Oh yeah, and I'm guilty of them. You're going to see them come up multiple times here.
Yeah, but it gets you through. I remember one of them for marksmanship or for rifle. I'm a lefty, so I apologize for everyone that's freaking out. But like, if you jam up, there's a quick little slack rack and roll that
Yep.
that I I learned it when I was 17, and it works on the 9mm and it works on the 223 slap rack and roll. And I remember getting jammed up in a live training, a simunition, and because I had done that so many dozens of times, I just dropped to a knee, slap rack and roll, fire, slap rack and roll until it worked. And it's like, so you're not so in the moment of tension or when the pressure finally got pulled on. If that VP can know, okay, I'm going to show up, I'm going to deliver, we're going to do, I call this a hot wash. I want you to unpack that next, the after action report. The hot wash, we're going to take some learning lessons, then we're going to get right back into it and do it again. It just takes this like, it's not importance, but it just becomes this something that they're going to repeat. And it's not like they're auditioning for their entire career every time they get into that. So, I wanted you to explain for the audience then, for those of us that aren't like military nerds, you're using left and right limits, which I love. I get what you're saying. I call it swim lanes, or most of us will call it swim lanes. And then also I want you to explain the importance of the after action report and why that's not like a naughty list and like condemning everyone.
Absolutely. So left and right limits in the Army speak, that's your boundaries where you can operate within. And if you go too far to the left or too far to the right and you're pushing those, you're actually encroaching on someone else's operation or their responsibility. Yes. So it's important that you, as a leader, very clearly define what those are so that you're not creating risk somewhere else in the organization or in the organization's mission.
That's so good.
The after action review.
1 second on that. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I want people to really chew on this. And I didn't realize, maybe this was from my military training, but early on in the corporate world, I hated when people created what I later called hidden pain points. And they're creating hidden pain points because they're overstepping their left and right limits, and they're taking on the weakness of another department. And then when that stops, all of a sudden, you're addressing this gigantic problem that was in a different swim lane. And so I have told people, you are being responsible to the company and generous to that other team by letting them operate within their own parameters, and then knowing that if they fail, that's something you guys can all address as a group.
Absolutely. And that AAR, I mean, natural segue here is exactly where you start to address those things.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, it's not condemning everybody or putting them down. It's the leader's responsibility when you do an after action review to make sure that this is as maximally engaging and inviting to anybody who was involved in the operation or the mission, the task that you were trying to accomplish. And you have to approach it, again, very humbly. You might get called out. And when you get called out, it's not about, putting you down or telling you did wrong. It's about how do we get better? And everything just needs to be framed from that perspective of this after action review is the single most important thing that a team or a leader in business can implement to immediately start driving improvement results. And I think the 5 questions that I shared just a minute ago, it's the what was supposed to happen. So you gave them their mission or their objective that they need to go achieve. You're defining that again. That way, everything that you look at in the rest of this after action review is going to be focused on that is what we were supposed to achieve. Then you look at what actually happened, and that's the deviation, right? Did we get to where we were supposed to go? Did we accomplish what we were supposed to accomplish? Did we hit the revenue goal that we were supposed to hit? Yes or no? Did we exceed it? And then why? Why did that happen? So that's where you get a little bit critical and you assess. For example, the VP I was meeting with yesterday, he was a door-to-door pest control sales is the company that he works in. So we break it down into KPIs that are very easy to track. Are you putting in the hours you need to put in? Are you knocking on the number of doors you need to knock? Are you starting the level of conversations? And then if any one of those KPIs is not hitting the target, there's a very clear action that's tied to it, right? So, you're not putting in the hours, you're sleeping in too much. You're not knocking on the doors, you're either spending too much time on the doorstep or you're not walking fast enough, right? So, I mean, it just identifies the problem. So we look at the
I've
why.
also found it. Go ahead.
And then from there, the question is, what do we need to change or improve? I like to say change or improve because it's not always something that you did poorly. It might just be something that you did really well, but in hindsight, it's not the best way to accomplish that. So what do we change or improve when we do this the next time? And then what do we need to keep doing the same? And that one's an important one to ask too, because sometimes you'll go in, you'll change the total plan, but there was something you did really, really well, and now you're actually handcuffing yourself because you're not doing that thing again.
Yeah.
You take all of that cumulative feedback with the team as a whole, and you implement that into your next mission, the objective, the left and right limits that you give. And that puts you into this process of continuous improvement that scales your systems and your outcomes.
Yeah, so what's interesting is corporate as a whole does not do feedback frequently enough, in my opinion.
Oh, I 100%
and so because
agree.
they don't do it, it gets super emotional. But I have found for the leaders out there, you can gently bring this to a direct report or subordinate also. And so in my world, we have a month end or quarter end. So 12 months in a year, obviously 4 of those are a quarter end. Big deal for the finance department, the orders department, the sales department. Like your ops people are working until 9 to midnight. Like they're trying to get all your clean orders booked. They're trying to get everyone compensation. So you can sit down with a direct report afterwards with an after action report and say, this is what we expected to happen. This is how it turned out. And then you could start unfolding that. How do you feel about that? How do you do you think it went the way that it was supposed to? And then all of a sudden, instead of, because I've also seen leaders not know what to do when they're disappointed with the direct report. So instead of just being, I'm so frustrated, you're such an idiot, why didn't you think of this?
Yeah.
You can just all walk through it logically. This is what we were after. This is what happened. This was the discrepancy that we see. What do you think didn't work? What do you think worked really well? And now all of a sudden your direct report is answering that for you. You just have a much more active conversation with the team. And then, and that in and of itself brings trust. I've had a lot of, I still call them subordinates, I guess, but I've had a lot of direct reports come back to me and they say, hey, you weren't always the nicest person, but I always respected you. I always really enjoyed working for you because it was clean. There was equity in it. It was predictable. They knew what they were going to get. And it wasn't like me on an emotional whim. We were aligned to to the company missions there. So
the beauty with that too is that you're putting yourself, when you do that with your direct report, it's not about telling them that they're doing something wrong. It's not about putting them down or shame or saying, hey, dude, you suck, you got to do better. It's working with them, and so they see that you're investing in them, you're giving them time, attention, energy to help them be better. And people appreciate that level of investment.
Yeah. The Coast Guard has such a silly thing. The Navy does this too. When you're on a ship, every morning by sunrise, the lights have to go off and the national ensign has to go up and the flag. And if you're a minute late, you screwed the whole day. And there's a lot of pressure as a little E3 running around. And one day a warrant officer, you guys have warrant officers in the Army also. So one day a warrant officer was the officer in charge and I missed it by like 3 minutes and I never did. And I remember coming to him and I started saying something. I was going to give him an excuse. I was like, sir, such and such. He's like, I don't need your excuses, Tabry. I need it to be up by sunrise. And I was like, dang. Like there really is nothing else you could say about that. It's like the after action there is we needed the lights off by sunrise. What happened was they came on 3 minutes after sunrise. And also everyone knows because there's 4 to 6 other ships, and there's 300 people on these ships. So
and they all
these are 06s. These are, so they see if your ship, the Morgenthau was mine, if the Morgenthau hosed it up, like that seaman on duty that day was going to get smoked. So anyway, to help us tell the audience what you do now, how would you broadly categorize yourself? Who do you love to serve? And then what do you serve them with? Like what's essentially your go-to-market right now? Like what's your offer and package?
Absolutely. So my background was really e-commerce. And in 2020, we had grown substantially by then. People started asking me, how are you doing this? And I kind of did a little bit of self-assessment and looked back on, my previous 5 years in business. And I realized that I wasn't inherently gifted when it came to sales. I was a good salesman, but I wasn't great. I wasn't great at tracking KPIs or anything like that. I realized my secret sauce was the military systems that I was using to lead the organizations. It was the leadership piece and the team development. So from there, that was kind of my natural transition into leadership and team development, coaching and consulting. Primarily now what I do is I help growing organizations install these military-inspired leadership systems, because if you're going to grow, you might as well mirror the second largest organization in the world. They've
100%.
invested the millions of dollars to develop these things. Let's learn from them. But we teach leaders this skill of leadership, this team development, and that helps them scale their systems and their outcomes so that they can grow the organization. Primarily now, I'm helping businesses that are doing, a couple $1 million a year and looking to grow, and they're maybe bottle capped or bottlenecked, and they don't know why the organization isn't growing. That's where we step in, and we can look and say, hey, you've been a 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur. Maybe you're involved in a 9-figure business, but just because you were good at the sales piece, just because you're good at that revenue piece, doesn't mean you can keep growing the team effectively without some coaching, training, development.
Yeah. Is there a floor for you where you're like, this org's probably a little bit too small? Like what window do you like to work in?
Yeah, I typically like to keep it above 7 figures, just because the level of investment, I think, and the willingness to learn or understand the problem is a little bit more serious. Now, we try to work with much larger corporations, right? I'm in Russell Brunson's inner circle, for example. And so a lot of the people that
I was going to bring him up as a bad example, and now I am going to bring it up. We'll bring it up after this.
Right on.
A little podcast. So let's talk about it.
I'm in that group, right? And I get exposure to a lot of people that are doing really big things in the small business world. And I love to work with people at that level, because they're the ones that exactly fall victim to I was a good marketer. I was a good sales bro.
Yeah.
I'm a bad business leader.
Yeah. It's interesting because in my profession, sales operations or revenue operations, you could say it's a combination of technical understanding and business understanding. And I've candidly said that you will not succeed. I've told people that wanted to be in my field, you won't succeed in revenue operations if you don't have a passion for business. Like, I don't care how smart you are on the tech side. So, so my point in that is I love these startup entrepreneurs, and I used to help them a lot years ago, because at the end of the day, for me, every business, whether you're 1.2 billion or 40 million, is a quote to cash lens. You're generating leads, you're turning that into opportunities and orders, and then you have to fulfill it, and then you have a finance side of that.
I love that you're
same business
phrasing it like that, because that's the system. That's the point, right? You've simplified it now.
Yeah, 100%. And so when I try to bring that down to a small business owner, they just don't get it. So I guess my point is, what I've found is that if you're not making over 6 million, and 4 million is a huge number, to be clear, but like if you're not making over 6 million, I just found that they don't have the budget to hire the right people,
they don't
or the budget to take things seriously.
The same way.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's do the Russell Brunson, and because I think it's important. I think he's a good example. I didn't know if you would know him or not. And for the audience, if you don't know him, Russell Brunson is a brilliant marketer, and he's made wonderful systems, and he has such an eloquent way of breaking things down into frameworks. And also he's a great ad copywriter. So at this point, he's probably made billions. I don't know his exact number, and I'm not endorsed by him. But you could say, if you look at his career, he's a hyper-talented marketer, and he's gotten very good at stage sales. So to his credit, he's a sales guy also. And he was doing one podcast where he talked about, it was like a team of 12 or 23, and he was explaining where he failed them on the leadership side, and I was listening to some of the things that he said, and I was like, oh, this is such an example of someone who is a brilliant marketer, but doesn't know how to empathetically connect with the team, and like coach them through process iteration, and also like falls into the trap of making the assumption that like, why can't you just figure this out? Like, I'm a super high performing, wildly successful guy. Why can't you be as autonomous as me? And so I don't say that to bash Russell, but I'm just curious if you could take that example and say, yeah, that's what I mean by these people who are really good at anything that they do. Like, you can't just look over at 60,000 a year or 70,000 a year, Jane or John, and be like, why didn't you think to go look this guy up in random resource and write it this way and take a side angle approach, Maybe 2 questions in this. Why do the staff fail you like that? Because staff often fail you, to be 100% clear. And then as the leader, like where do you have to bring yourself down to say, dang it, I chose to lead 12 people, 23 people, 100 people. Like, this is what leadership means.
Okay, so there was really 3 questions there. just wrote down the last two,
Cool.
so I don't forget
Thanks
them.
for calling that.
So the first one was about Russell, right? And I absolutely love him. He's one of my most valued mentors in my business.
He's
development
great. Yeah, I
journey.
can't say it enough.
Perhaps the best marketer in the world. Perhaps.
I think so. Yeah. And he bought the guy who was the best marketer. He bought all his stuff.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Dan Kennedy. So we're good.
But Russell's also the first one to admit that he is not a great leader. So
That's right.
He recognized, and this is actually something I think is really important for uber successful businesses. They all have different key players, right? You have like a rainmaker, and maybe Russell's the rainmaker because he's out there, he's selling, he's building relationships, generating revenue. But behind him, there's going to be an engineer, someone who understands the systems, the process, the back end, the technology stack, right? And then you've got the creative side, and that's going to be the people that are focused on making it good and beautiful and the packaging and delivery to the customer. I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Allen, but as a recent example, a year ago, Russell hires Bill Allen, who was a real estate consultant, to be the CEO of all of Russell's coaching programs and stuff like that, right? So he recognizes I'm not the one to lead the business. I need to hire other people to cover down. And I want to be just upfront with people. You could be an awesome marketer, awesome salesperson. You could be the business owner and not be the CEO, and that's okay.
Totally agree.
Second question was about the staff failing you. And, we mentioned Jocko earlier. A thought that he shared in Extreme Ownership that I really liked was that there's no bad teams, there's bad leaders. And I don't...
I kind of disagree with him there, but I want to hear this, unpack this whole thing.
I was going to say, I don't think that as a blanket statement is always true. There can be bad teams. But in my experience so far, and with everyone that I've worked with, if you go and you assess the performance, there's always a breakdown somewhere that's not just the employee.
Yeah.
There was a failure to communicate what the actual expectation was, or they had, the end state in mind, but it wasn't a clear picture of A, B, and C had to be true for it to be a victory. So maybe they got A and B, but they didn't get C, So I think a lot of those fall back on, did the leader actually sit down and clearly express what the expectation and the standard was? Are they consistently holding them to that? Because if you're not, you're going to create an environment where sometimes they meet the expectation and other times they don't, and they skate because they're not being upheld. And did you clearly define what success looks like for them in the position? Yeah. And if you did, have you coached them up on how to achieve it? If they're failing you once, are they failing you consistently? Have you invested in developing them? If you're not, is that on you or is that on them? Now, sometimes it can be on them, right? If they come in and you hire somebody and you think you're getting this A player and they've just flat out lied to you about what their capabilities are, that guy's failed you and you should probably just cut ties because there's no trust there anymore. But as long as you lead with, I think, again, the objective, the left and right limits, a high level of trust, it was General George S. Patton that said, I tell someone what to do, I never tell them how to do it, and then I let them surprise me with their ingenuity. And so I try to take that approach as the general advice, knowing that if I set the expectation and I uphold the standard, they're probably going to get to the goal. Yeah.
Do you want to touch on the third one? Because I actually have a lot to unpack on the second one.
Let's do it.
If you
Let's
want to
unpack
dive deeper
it,
into that. Okay, so I left active duty military after 12 years because I read Jim Collins' Good to Great. I know this is the weirdest tipping point ever. I was stationed in Puerto Rico, which again, Coast Guard, Semper Paratus, go Coast Guard. And I had a kid in there who we'll just call Johnson, and he was an E4. He was horrible at his job. And every day I would walk into the shop. There was 3 6s, a couple E4s, and I would just say, Johnson, you're fired. You're freaking fired, But you can't fire people in the military, right? You can paperwork them. You can try to coach them up. So I always disagreed with this statement that the military would try to put into you and say, if you just put 5 people in a boat together, a good leader's going to make that work. Because Jim Collins had a line in there about the bus, which I always paraphrase, which is, if you put the right people on the bus magically goes in the right direction. And again, I know I'm paraphrasing that. He really meant right people, right seat. And I was like, dang, he's so right. So what I took from that is, you owe I believe you owe your team strength, courage, authenticity. I took
like
core
that.
values from the military. I chose my own. Strength, courage, authenticity. You owe them clarity in the mission. They need to know what the expectations are. You need to be able to give them feedback early. But there are some people, and you can tell normally within 2 weeks, hey, listen, this just isn't working out for you. It's not going to work out for us. I don't want to keep you here any longer. So I know what Jocko means. This is what I want to unpack with you. When someone says extreme ownership, that person that I hired poorly, already I'm taking ownership of it, right? If you hear the languages I'm choosing, I hired poorly. I didn't give them enough maybe clarity in the hiring process, or maybe our communication styles didn't match and I couldn't find the time to constantly change mine, you know? So I understand extreme ownership. I don't think it's worth a leader's time to sit there and grumble and say that frickin' Johnson, like he's such a scammer and like just wasted 90 days of my life.
Agreed.
Like you have to take the ownership, but I don't think that it also means that you can magically change the adult character of another consenting adult. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So here's my thought on that is you're responsible for the outcome. As the leader, you're responsible for the organization.
That's right.
So it's also your responsibility and decision then, at what point do you not continue to invest in this person or keep them on your team? And it's okay to, part ways.
Yeah. So then the third, okay, good. I'm glad we got that out there because I agree. I just think some things, it's not even fair to call them a platitude because they're truths. You do need extreme ownership or you're just going to have a miserable, sour, bitter life. But, like grown-ups are grown-ups. So the third part of the question then was, let's bring this high performer. Because I also see in the tech world, you'll take a coder who is great at Python and all of a sudden he or she is the manager of 12 developers. Well, you're a horrible manager. Like you just don't understand. You were good at what you did. You're not good at leading. Same thing in my field, sales operations. I've worked for a lot of bad leaders and it's excruciating to me as a guy who cares about leadership. So what do you do then? You're talking to a higher performer. How much of it can you coach in? Maybe there's two parts to this question. How much of it can you coach in? And then even if they are wondering why the team is failing them, how do you bring them down a level and say, maybe try looking at it this way?
So, okay, I'm writing down just so I don't forget the full question.
Sure.
Let's take the developer for an example. This one's a common one. I've seen this a couple times in my professional career over the last 3 or 4 years. We had, even in one of my own businesses actually, but really smart computer scientist. Part of what makes him really good at his job is that he is just locked in on that computer screen. Correct. I mean, maybe 100%. He's not actually antisocial, but you would get that perception at work because he's just doing coding. He's learning. He's drafting and I don't know all those terms, right?
Yeah.
But because of his skill in that, or because he is developing the skill in that, he is inherently not working with people. And I think right there off the bat, that's why those developers often run into an issue when it comes to the management and the leadership piece, because you haven't developed the relationships. You haven't been working with others. You don't know how to have those professional engagements the same way. Now, that's not to down on the developers or the coders. What they do is very vital. Here's where the coaching, I think, plays in, though. My philosophy on this has always been that I can hire someone to cover a weakness on my team or of myself. I can hire somebody to amplify a strength. And if they are a high trust, high character individual, I can teach them tasks. I can teach them systems. So that's where we default back to the very simplified, okay, if you're the coder that gets, or the developer that gets promoted to manage a team of 12 and you have no idea what you're doing, as the leader in the organization, I'm going to sit down with you. I'm going to teach you these systems. I'm going to set my expectations with you on this. So how you're giving your mission briefs, how you're doing your after action reviews, when you're doing the follow-ups, are you doing developmental counseling and backwards planning with your team? And then I'm going to maybe hand walk you for the first few weeks, few months. And if you're not getting to the point where I have confidence and trust that you're going to actually be successful in doing this on your own, then you're not the right fit for the position. And that's where, I'm taking extreme ownership of my decision. I put you there, or as the organization's outcome, and I'm going to make a change. So I think you can coach a lot And then I think you also need to have the discernment to say, hey, this is a good fit or it's not a good fit anymore.
Yeah, I think it's a lot like sports. I think you could coach almost anyone into mediocre to above average.
For sure.
I'm training for a triathlon right now, for example.
Right on.
And yeah, I was like, I got to do an Ironman before I'm 45, so I'm doing a little Olympic one. Did I see? I actually saw that you were doing ultras or something. Is that right? Did I see that? Pick that up in your profile?
I've run a lot of half marathons.
Okay. But so then you'll appreciate this. I'm a 9-minute mile guy. I just am. I don't know why. I'm 43. Like, I'm comfortable tonight. Like, all my high achieving friends, they like their 7-minute miles. You know, I see some of the Strava reports and I'm like, whew. But, you know, like, I have the discipline now to run a plan. And even now, getting back at 43, I'm doing a run cadence 3 times a week. I got a little metronome I'm trying to do 170 beats per second from the running coach. And but I'll never be like the top 10% finisher in a Boston Marathon, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm cool with that. So I think that with someone willing to run a plan and do frameworks and formulas, you'll get them there. But now, on the same level of coaching, it's like, whew, when you find someone with natural talent and they took coaching, I mean, it's outstanding. Just curious, who really inspired you as a leader when you're just like, man, he or she just left huge imprints on me? And like, what's your North Stars when you're thinking about these natural abilities and how you train others?
This is fun. So, shout out to a military leader who really inspired me when I was a young man. I was a private.
Good.
His name is Christopher Budahaas. He had retired as the Army general, the Army National Guard general from Florida. And now he does a lot of Veterans Network TV, you know,
so
consulting
adjunct
stuff.
general, that's what they call those?
He wasn't the state adjutant general.
He was like the head of the whole...
He was the Army.
Okay, all right.
So, you know,
I'm tracking.
A state adjutant general is Army and Air National Guard. He was just the Army general, the land component.
And also, maybe. I just heard that you were prior enlisted before you took a commission. Is that right?
Correct.
Big deal, audience. Big deal. Go look that up later. Yeah, we like Parker a whole lot more now.
Just as the thought, the best officers are all the ones who are enlisted first, and it's because they understand what they're asking the people to do, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But Christopher Budahaas was like, he was my squadron commander when I was in 2nd Cavalry Regiment in Germany. We were deploying to Afghanistan, and I think the thing that really inspired me about him, and honestly, I never worked for a commander that inspired as many people as he did. It was just that he was always willing to be in the shit. Sorry, can I edit my language here? With the soldiers.
We keep it in. You're good.
He was the dude who was like, as a lieutenant colonel, he's getting out and leading battalion PT, not just in front of the run with the guide on, but I mean, like, he would get out in the motor pool in front of everybody. And he would be doing the push-ups in the front row. He'd be doing the flutter kicks. He'd be doing the air squats. He'd be leading the run. So everyone looks at that and they're like, wow, this dude is really motivated and he's maintaining his fitness and he's keeping up with all these young dudes. Mm-hmm. But then talking to him, and here's the thing that actually just blew my mind. We were in Kandahar province, Afghanistan, on a little fob. Mm-hmm. And one day, you know, we're just passing and walking, like we're going to my tent. He's going to his tent. I, you know, salute, and he stops me, shakes my hand, and he just says, Parker, I felt like I should ask, you know, how's your family doing? How's your mom and dad?
So good. Yeah.
And he remembered their names. Now, I don't think I had ever talked to him before. Yeah. I don't think I had ever told him my parents' names. But then he says, how's Chris and Ray? And I'm like, good. How did he...
That's natural talent,
How did he know that?
Ability.
And so, I'm like, well... He cared to stop and talk to me. 2, he knew about my life, my family, my situation.
That's right.
And I was just blown away. And I've carried that impression with me ever since. One day, you know, later towards the end of the deployment, he comes up to me and he gives me a coin in the motor pool. And he just says, you know, I wanted to say thank you for being the best forward observer in our regiment. And I'm just so grateful for that.
Yeah, risky position.
But very, very, I mean, authentic leadership, down to earth, and also taking the time to invest in his knowledge of me, my family, my situation. I mean, it just blew me away. And so I've always carried that with me as the example of a leader that I want to be like, aspire to be like, achieve, maybe feel that. If I could make somebody else feel the way that he made me feel, you charge the gates of hell with that guy, you know?
Yeah, it's so good. I want to get mildly profound here for a second.
Please.
And then like quickly divert so we don't cry over all of our fallen heroes. So you were in a forward operating base, an FOB for the audience, which means that you were outside of a bigger base. You had a lieutenant colonel, which is akin to like an executive officer, like a COO, you know, that maybe of a multinational organization that like was running all of America, for example. And so when you deployed, your squadron was how many people do you think?
I would guess ballpark 1,000 to 1,100.
Yeah, so this lieutenant colonel knew that there was a potential that X amount of these people weren't coming home. And I just want everyone to sit on this for a minute, because this is the weight that leaders carry. And on the corporate side, it's different. Maybe people are going to get laid off. Maybe 600 people. I think Dell fired 600 people recently. 600 people are going to wonder how they're feeding their family a month from now. All right. Well, this lieutenant colonel carries the weight of knowing, hey, Parker, how are you doing? What's your parents' names? Because one day he might have to show up at Parker's doorstep himself and say, I'm really sorry, Mom and Dad, etc. And so I think what I mean for people to capture by that is the people working and looking up to you for shepherding and leadership, they don't have to carry that weight. But you as the leader know that you're so much bigger. And so if you can take the time to remember someone's name, to remember a little detail about them, to show up and be present, you've done something for them that built so much trust, rapport, and esteem that when the moment comes that you have to ask someone way forward of the unit, a forward observer, to go even farther where there might be danger, knowing risk there, he or she runs into battle with you. And I haven't found a way to translate that understanding into the corporate world. And I don't mean for us to like go super heavy on this, but do you understand that I mean, clearly you understand the weight, but how have you tried to convey that to other company leaders to say, listen, these are little things that matter and they go so far for you as a leader?
So I put it back into, what's the best way that we can maybe relate this to them and their experiences. And let me ask you maybe this as a question to answer your question a little bit. You're working very heavily in revenue operations, right? But when you see somebody who maybe applies this kind of style of leadership to get to know them, to carry a little bit of that investment in them and their lives and their family, what do you see their output do? I mean, typically in my experience,
it's great.
It increases because now they know this person and this organization that he's leading, they're interested in investing in me. They care about me. Yeah. And there really is a connection.
I had a team of 23, was the largest on the corporate side, and I had offices in Sydney, Tokyo, Dublin, and Denver. And on the Denver side, I had the most. So every morning before I opened my email, I didn't keep email on my phone because of the worldwide coverage. It was just a hot mess in there. So I always chose when I was going to open my email and then address the day. And the first thing I would do is walk around the floor and say, hey, Fiona, how are you? Hey, Lynn, how's it going? And that's it. Just quick little icon. And then I could get in my office because I needed them to know that they're human and that I see them and that I see how hard we work.
Yeah, I absolutely love that practice. I make it a point every time I'm a city councilman in my hometown now.
Cool.
And so before every city council meeting, I just walk through the audience before I go up on the dais, and I'll just shake everybody's hand and say hi and welcome them and thank them to coming to the city council meeting and that I appreciate them being willing to share their perspectives and thoughts. But just doing that, I mean, like you said, it lets them feel seen. It lets them know that you are recognizing their contributions, what they're providing, what they're doing. And I think that you always will get a better result out of people when you can build that relationship and show that investment.
I think it's either Russell Brunson or Myron Gaines, who's close to Russell, but he has a thing where he says like some people use the people to get the money or to serve the money, and then other people use the money to serve the people. And it's like that distinction right there is a big one when it comes to leadership. Yes. Like some people are just trying to get to the next title, and they're going to talk out of this politics. They're going to talk out of both sides of their mouth. They're going to set you up for failure. They're going to roll you right under the bus when the pressure hits, and they're going to preserve the integrity of their path to whatever they feel like their career ambitions are. Mm-hmm. And then other people are going to be there in the suck of it, and they're going to be with you when it's tough, and they're going to know your name, and they're going to be human, and it feels different. And it's interesting because I don't know if you could say like those two forces are constantly competing with each other, but I've found that you get more productive results when you're the human leader, when you're the present leader.
Absolutely. Well, think about it. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the most basic outside of, physical needs is human connection. You want to belong. You want to have a friend. You want to have a spouse, a partner, But why not translate that exact same concept over into the leadership piece, right? If people already long for that connection, and especially you think about it, most people are working, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks out of the year. If you're putting that much time and effort and self-investment into that as an employee, how much of a difference does it make if you can build a connection with somebody else in the office? And I think a good leader is somebody who is leaning into those relationships and helping that piece be fulfilled in a way that's meaningful to the employee or the individual.
What do you see as things that are like, I hate to use the word virtue signaling, but I see a lot of like, our values are on the wall, but that's not how we actually behave, or they tell you, oh, family first, but then they're super bothered that you need to take PTO, or, a big one is companies are like, hey, you have unlimited PTO, and then really nobody's actually
you're going to be shamed if you take it.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the false flags is a better word for that, or false indicators that you see, or things you would steer leaders away from to say, watch out for this, that's not real leadership?
So when you step into a company or you're consulting with a company like this, it's really easy to identify where these issues are because you just talk to people and they'll tell you, right? It then also becomes really easy to treat. I actually prefer to err on the side of not having the defined, you're going to be in the office this much, or you can only take this much PTO. Yeah. I would much prefer that it's a work-based decision-making process. And that's just my personal philosophy, but it's, for example, right now I have an executive assistant, and she very routinely only works 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And it's not because I've defined her hours. It's because she handles my calendar, she handles my inbox, she handles my scheduling, takes care of the outbound messaging, things like that, right? But she gets the work done, and then she can take the time off.
She's highly effective at it, I'll tell you, being on the other end of it.
So it has absolutely nothing to do, in my opinion, with we have to hold you in this seat 9 hours a day, 8 hours a day. You can only take 2 weeks of PTO a year. Who cares?
Yeah.
Is the work getting done or not?
Yeah.
And if the work's getting done, I want you to go and invest in your family. I want you to take care of that stuff.
See, that's almost a great point, because I would call that performance-based compensation or management. And I think that matters because it takes out a lot of subjectivity in some of the not rules, but like some of the parameters you put around a person. Because I love to say, listen, here's the 120 things that need to get done this week, and like if you're done on Wednesday, I don't care. As long as shoot me, don't let me get rolled into the bus because you hid something from me, and don't blindside me. I think that's great. Tell me more about the diagnostic side. I am just curious because some leaders that are bad, they don't even know they're bad because they're not talking to the team. Yeah, so
exactly.
And I know what you mean. I will give you, I don't mean to like shame these guys, but I was with a small mid-market company. They were like $120 million, and they had a white collar section, all us corporate salary people. And they made a molecule. And so that molecule was made in a plant, and what you would expect to look like a chemical plant.
Okay.
So that was a blue collar section, like not disparagingly, but it's just different. They wore Dickies coveralls, they drove forklifts, and they worked engines. And they did a rebrand, this company. And so the CEO showed up in a bright orange suit, and and they brought us all the plant, and it looked like this hideous scene from like Game of Thrones, because you had all these people in like nice shoes and corporate swag, and then like all these other guys were showing up in steel toe boots and looking around, and they absolutely did not respect this CEO because he was so far removed from the reality of their world. And I remember telling him, I sent him a text on the way home. It's like a 3-hour drive, and I was like, hey man, you have a morale problem here on the, like I was just talking about the top right of that room. And I was like, I know some really good military leaders. They were like some E8s that I know at my squadron now. I was like, we could bring them in. We could have some conversations. But I knew that he would never be able to bridge that gap of respect because he never talks to them. Whereas you on the diagnostic side, it would have taken you just a second to just be like, I don't even have to ask them questions because I hear them gossiping right now. So like, what does that look like for a leader that might think he or she doesn't have a problem? Like, you walked up, you asked what kind of questions and heard what kind of results, and then you just instantly knew, like, oh man, I've got a huge gap over here.
So there's a trick in that question. If you're that leader in the bright orange suit, and you don't have the respect of your people, you're not going to be able to get the information. They're not going to trust you or care to tell you because they don't think you actually care to implement a result or change anything. Then it becomes a trick of how do you actually collect that information? I think that's where a consultant like me does a really good job of being able to come in, because you're an outside third-party observer and they know that you're being hired just to make the organization better, typically speaking.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean you as the consultant. You stepped in. What kind of questions are you asking? And then you already know the kind of things that you're going to hear, and then how are you relaying that back to that leader?
Awesome.
Hey, orange suit guy.
So I typically I won't touch the leadership stuff until I've talked to the individual about who they are and what they do, right? You build that little bit of rapport first. But I want to understand their job. And it's not that I actually need to understand every facet of their job, but it's that if I get them talking about that, I can see maybe perhaps points where they would need external support. And then I can ask about, are they getting that external support? Oh, how does your management actually handle those requests? You know, that kind of a thing. And then you can start to identify pain points. Well, why don't you think you're getting that support? Or how could that be better, right? So we just build on that information. And I'm a big, military maybe drained this in me. I always have my like notebook and pen. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm writing down as much information as I can. And we identify just by that process of what's the work, pain points, support, no support, why, some of the issues. And a lot of times people just flat out tell you, well, they're so focused on something else that they don't pay any attention to us. Oh, they don't invest in us. We haven't got a pay raise in 3 years, any of those kind of things. But they're all important information pieces. And you can quickly ascertain, after talking to just a handful of people in the organization, is there a morale issue? Maybe, yes, no. Is there a support issue? Is there an infrastructure issue, right? You identify the trend, right? I don't like to make any decisions that aren't data-driven or trend-driven. So we collect these data points from each of the individuals. We can take that back to maybe the next level of management. Maybe we talk to people who are in junior leadership roles if we're not directly consulting them. But all of those create the data points that allow us to then identify where the actual problems are breaking down or where the problems are created, and then assess a plan on how we can actually correct or implement a solution or a workaround that would alleviate some of the pain points in that company. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, how's that? No, it does. It does. How does that? What it reminds me of is some of the larger companies send out that company-wide survey. I'm drawing a blank on it now. Do you know the employee satisfaction thing?
Employee satisfaction. The Army, and then, we still do them twice a year.
Actually.
Command climate surveys.
I hate it because, and then I was in an org, a very tiny org, and the scores were hideous. And I just remember the two managers were like trying to talk everyone out of their score. But anyway, that's a different conversation. Let's go. So this guy, Orange Suit, it's an org of 120 people, and 20 of them are white collar, and then 100 essentially factory workers. What's you're going back to the CEO's office. How do you think you break this down? Like, hey, bud, I got good news, bad news here. Like, what does that look like to them besides just maybe a readout of like the command climate survey? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that we don't approach the problem until we also have a solution. or I mean, we won't bring the problem back to the CEO, the executive suite, until we have a recommendation for them. And so we have to, like I said, collect that data to create an informed and educated position that we can go and present the solution with. So I'm going to say, hey, the example that you gave, orange shoot guy, you've got a morale issue. Here's why you have a morale issue. You've got 20 dudes who work up here that are totally detached from the blue-collar 100%. Team. They don't understand their pain points. They're not supporting them the way they need to be supported. And that 100 other people don't feel valued by you, and they don't feel like they're respected by you. Here's how you can approach this better. After talking to them, after talking to their middle management, one, they feel like you guys are high and mighty on the ivory tower. It would probably do some benefit if you can go down there and occasionally, be seen on the floor, talk to those guys, build a little bit of a relationship with them. Maybe second, it's, hey, they need to see that they're being invested in, so quality of life improvements that are going to help them, right? Obviously not diving into too much of knowing the data behind this example, but...
No. Well, like one anecdotal point, my squadron is, it's kind of small. I think there's like 120. They're air traffic controllers. They're forward deployable air traffic controllers. So they're called CAOS now, Combat Air Operations Squadrons. And you know what makes them really happy? 12 packs of Natty Light.
That's
and burgers or pizza.
That makes any blue-collar section happy too.
Yes, right. And that was my point with the CEO. And I wasn't like, you got to buy a 12-pack of Natty Ice to solve this. But my point is like, when you come in with all these, but it's that ivory tower that you said. It's like it's literally not personified, but like extended down, because you showed up with all these well manicured orange boxes, and inside of it was like little party favors that they're never going to use, you know, and it was like these sweaters, and I was like, dang man, just put a bunch of cold beer there, and like, we just want to talk to everyone for a minute. We're really excited about this, and we know you guys work hard, and this is why it matters to our brand. And look, if we can up this by 20%, like we're probably looking at 10 to 20% raises and bonuses next year too. It's like, whoa, did you just talk to me about pay and like things I care about and give me beer?
What you just did was, I think, really important, or what you just said was really important, is that you made it relatable to them.
Yes.
One of the things that's a common problem that I have to identify and address is the internal messaging, right? Like you might have a really great marketing section that is, got an awesome hook story offer and makes it relatable to the client's perspective and their pain points. But how do you have internal messaging when it comes from your leadership to your teams? And are you making it relatable to them? Like if you go in there and you say, hey, we need to raise it, production 10 to 20% next year, everyone initially hears, I've got to work 10 to 20% more or harder. But then when you make it relatable to them and it's, hey, if we can get this 10% production increase, we can also give everybody raises and bonuses. And then it's, I'm working for something, not just, it's relatable to what is important to them and what they need to achieve or accomplish.
Yeah. Now, leadership 201, you got to follow through.
Yes.
I hate it so much when don't dangle money out there and then you have some jacked excuse for why they're not getting it.
It becomes easier to do that if you actually follow just a very basic system or a process, right? So we talked about the after action review before, and I mentioned supervise and refine, but as you're ongoing in this process, the leadership should be engaged in, hey, did we hit those KPIs that we were talking about earlier? If we did or we're not, let's keep talking to the team about it so that they know where we are in this process. Then it's not a surprise whether they make it or don't make it.
Yeah. Two things then on success for you.
Okay.
When you go into a business and you're offering them some kind of executive package, do you try to tie your success to some financial outcome for them? Like, you guys want to grow 40% year over year. We're going to help you do that. Or is it more of an intangible for you? And then I'd love it if you could share like one of the success stories that you really love and like what those kind of turnarounds look like for you, like who you love working with and the wreck it was before, how you got in there, and then what it looks like after. Yeah,
absolutely. So kind of intangible, not intangible. I do two different
it's sort of intangible.
Essentially. One is just I'm paid up front. The other is I can take a portion of equity. And if I take the portion of equity, I'm going to stay on
that's nice.
Long term, and I'm going to, I'm constantly consulting you because then I'm invested in the company long term, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So I actually really like doing deals like that because everyone just gets a better outcome. I'm not getting paid unless you're getting the result.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, the validation, I don't know, like I mentioned earlier, I started in e-commerce. I left the active duty army. I started building an e-commerce brand. It took me years to actually get that thing off the ground. I should have learned from mentors earlier and invested in myself, and I didn't. I just tunnel visioned on the work, and I just beat it over the head until we made millions of dollars. But at that point, it stopped being about money for me, and it started being about the fulfillment. So kind of how I ended up staying into coaching long term was that I feel really satisfied and fulfilled when I can see other people growing. And not just other people growing, I think about the second and third order effects. So if I can come in and I can help an organization, year over year revenue increase 10, 20, 30%, I can stop and see how does that increase job production? How are these people getting more money, and what do they get to invest in then as a side effect? For example, me making money let me be a youth sports coach because I could take time off and I could invest in that. But then I'm able to contribute back to my community in a way that I wasn't able to do so previously. And so I think about all of the families and the lives that are positively impacted when it comes to, maybe even some just basic leadership and team development system that helps that organization increase their productivity or business development piece to a point where they can make more revenue and they can pay back to their people and give back to the community. And I love that. That is one of my coaches and mentors, Akbar Sheikh. His model is make more to give more. And so I latched onto that, a few years ago when I had first started working with him, and I've loved that mindset and that mentality because I can see it unfold as we help people. There is always an inherent connection, I feel like, to.
Yeah, I get, not to make it hyper transactional, but I give 10% of my income to charity, to church specifically. And I got my contribution statement back in January. I was like, holy smokes, look at that. And it was encouraging. Yeah. It's like, it became a little goal for me. Like, how can I make that 40K next year or
Absolutely.
50K, So
Absolutely.
It's super cool.
I love that.
Tell us then, who do you love to work with? Like what's your favorite company profile or executive profile or person? And then where can they find you, and what would you want to offer? Is there anything you want to give away to the audience, or just a specific way to find you? Like
giveaway.
How would you sum that up in a nutshell for them?
So
it doesn't have to be. You could just say a website.
Yeah, I to be honest, I've worked with businesses and entrepreneurs at a variety of levels now, because I got my start in coaching, helping other small businesses grow. And then that involvement in like Russell Brunson's inner circle, that's what kind of put me up to working with the bigger businesses that are doing $10, $20 million a year type thing. I really love working with, I said like $1 million is kind of the low end now in annual revenue, where I just, below that, you need to learn other lessons first, right? You need to get the marketing and the sales done.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
that's a good way of putting it.
And to be honest, I mean, you talked about revenue success, or somebody who's like a CRO, they're never going to be successful until they learn the business piece. For me, it's similar, where you have to learn the lessons of the initial business, how you start, how you run, how you build the team that supports you, before you can actually scale the leadership, the team development, and the revenue as a result of that.
There's some painful mistakes you need to make there in that first couple million also, so that you truly appreciate it when you're 6 to 10 and on to 12.
So I think, the most fun spot for me, if I were just, base it on like the enjoyment of helping those people, is maybe the $5 to $10 million range.
I like that.
Because I actually feel like that's a pretty easy one typically to grow in. Like if you've made it to $5 million, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from doubling that and hitting $10 million years consistently.
100%.
And
I feel like 6
there
million
is just the leadership, typically.
That's right. 6 million, you're still feeling a lot of founder pressure.
Yes.
And I know if you got through that 5, 6, you're on your way to 12. Like that's a huge inflection
my own,
point.
Story, it was, I bootstrapped really hard from 0 to 1.5. And then we start hiring a couple people to support me, but it's still me up to the first $5 million. And then after that, it's a $15 million year. And then after that, we're consistently 15 to 20, So, but the lessons are very different at those different stages. And so I just think, until you're at that $5 million, $6 million is what you're saying, you're learning a different lesson. And the one that I really enjoy working with is, you mentioned the entrepreneur, the leadership bottleneck. That's my fun piece. Now, with that, we've helped larger organizations too, more on the consulting piece. That's where I go in and I'm meeting with maybe the junior VPs. I'm meeting with the C-suite. I'm helping understand, or I'm learning from them what their pain points are, and then I'm going and I'm talking to the employees. I'm figuring out, where's that breakdown? Where's the support? Where's the lack of support? How do we resolve this? And then what's the actual revenue driver on the back end? Because nobody wants to invest in anything if it's not going to drive the revenue. So I don't typically make some grand revenue promise, right? Like I'm going to come in, I'm going to fix your leadership, and your leadership is going to make this 10x your business next year.
I think that's fair.
But I that's where I said I'm very willing to make the deal that's equity based. The catch is then when I help you make an extra $10-20 million, I get paid big.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's interesting that you said that. I do want you to tell everyone where to find you, but I have been hyper passionate about leadership for a long time, and then it's made me successful at what I do, and my teams appreciate it. It's hard to sell, right? It's like trying to tell someone to go to the gym 3 to 5 times a week. Monitor your calories, get sunlight, eat healthy, do boring basics. It's really hard to sell. So I applaud you for attacking that market because people need it. Like they desperately need good leadership. And maybe you can say how do you address that as a challenge? Like people do need this.
Absolutely. Typically speaking, and we touched on it at the front, a bad leader doesn't know they're a bad leader unless someone tells them they're a bad leader. And if more than one person tells you you're a bad leader, you're probably going to understand it to a little bit more serious of a level. The way that I am able to maybe position and address this is more in the messaging, and it's identifying the surrounding pain points first. So if somebody has a leadership problem, they might not identify it as a leadership problem first. It could be, we talk about in some of my advertisements and social media posts, is your team not getting the results that you expect them to get? And that's kind of the hook, but it's also, hey, that's a problem that a bad leader is going to have. They might not know that it's because of their poor leadership.
That's good.
So that's how we start those conversations and get people in the door. And it's not just, talking about, is it the team performance piece? Is there conflict on your teams that there shouldn't be? Here's how we can help, right? So we just start those conversations, and it's never actually, hey, you're a bad leader and you need to hire me. It's, you're having this problem. We can address that problem.
Yeah. And then the revelation might be, here's some character development.
Yeah. Or here's, again, the systems that you can implement immediately to put yourself and your team in a position of continuous improvement.
That's super fair. Parker, where can everyone find you, and how would you like them to reach out to? And then if someone wanted to take a first step with you, what does that look like? What would you tell them to do?
Absolutely. So you can find me on any social media platform at Parker McCumber, or on Instagram and X at the real Parker McCumber, because there was some fake ones out there for a time. And then I run, my consultancy is Mission Ready Systems, and you can find me at parkermccumber.com as well.
Good. Thank you, Parker. I really appreciate it. Everyone else, if you made it this far with us, I want you to hit like and subscribe for me, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thanks so much.